Hey Drewski, how's it going? I hope everybody's having a good week. If you're traveling, I hope you get where you're going safely. It's a dangerous world out there, guys. Last time, so I was in 2 years ago, Thanksgiving? Yeah, 2 years ago, I was going to some family members to have Thanksgiving, driving pretty much across country to do so, and I ended up in a car accident about 20 minutes away. This was like a 18-hour drive, if I didn't stop, but of course I stopped and everything, so it ends up being like a 24-hour drive, and I ended up getting in a car accident. My car was totaled. It was terrible, terrible time. So please, if you guys are driving anywhere, stay safe. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It's a nice holiday to relax before the craziness of Christmas. Growing up, it wasn't the most relaxing because the amount of food that would be prepared. My mom was always stressed about getting it done in time and all together. It's quite a lot of skill to be able to have everything still hot on the table, but be cooking all day. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started for the day. First one, Science Daily. Of course, there wasn't a lot right now. A little bit dry in the news department for anthropology right now. So, perceptual links between sound and shape may unlock origins of spoken words. Most people around the world agree that the made-up word booba sounds round in shape, and the made-up word kiki sounds pointy. A discovery that may help to explain how spoken languages develop, according to a new study. Language scientists have discovered that this effect exists independently of the language that a person speaks or the writing system that they use. It could be a clue to the origins of spoken words. The research breakthrough came from exploring the booba kiki effect, where the majority of people, mostly Westerners, in previous studies intuitively matched the shape on the left to the neologism booba and the form on the right to kiki. An international research team has conducted the largest cross-cultural test of the effect, surveying 917 speakers of 25 different languages, representing 9 language families and 10 writing systems, discovering that the effects occur in societies around the world. Publishing their findings in Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, the team, led by experts from the University of Birmingham and Leibniz Center General Linguistics, Berlin, says that such iconic vocalizations may form a global basis for the creation of new words. Our findings suggest that most people around the world exhibit the booba kiki effect, including people who speak various languages and regardless of the writing system they use. Our ancestors could have used links between speech sounds and visual properties to create some of the first spoken words. And today, many thousands of years later, the perceived roundness of the English word balloon may not be just a coincidence after all. The booba kiki effect is thought to derive from phonetic articulatory features of the words. For example, the rounded tips of the B and the stressed vowel in booba, and the intermittent stopping and starting of air in pronouncing kiki. To find out how widespread the booba kiki effect is across human populations, the researchers conducted an online test with participants who spoke a wide range of languages, including, for example, Hungarian, Japanese, Farsi, Georgian, and Zulu. The results showed that the majority of participants, independent of their language and writing system, showed the effect, matching booba and the rounded shape and kiki in the spiked one. New words that are perceived to resemble the object or concept they refer to are more likely to be understood and adopted by a wider community of speakers. Sound symbolic mappings, such as in booba kiki, may play an important ongoing role in the development of spoken language vocabularies. The researchers note that the potential for booba kiki to play a role in language evolution is confirmed by the evidence they collected. It shows that the effect stems from a deeply rooted human capacity to connect speech sound to visual properties, and is not just a quirk of speaking English. I wonder if they used any others than the booba kiki sounds, if they used anything else that may denote something different, like your M sounds and N's and sounds. It'd be interesting. Looks like they only used booba and kiki. Too bad. Alright, how to tell Thanksgiving story on its 400th anniversary. This one's seems like it might be a little spicy. If not for a few lines written by English colonist Edward Winslow, the uniquely American holiday of Thanksgiving might never have made it to the dining room table. A celebration of family, food, and football, the tradition of a festive harvest time meal evolved from a letter penned by the esteemed settler about an obscure event held in the fall of 1621 at Plymouth Colony in what is now Massachusetts. Our harvests being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling, that so we might after have a special manner rejoice together. After we had gathered the fruits of our labors, they 4 in one day killed as much fowl, as with a little help beside served the company almost a week, at which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming amongst us, and amongst the rest, their greatest King Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted, and they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor, and upon the captain and others. So that was a quote by your Edward Winslow, recalling the first Thanksgiving. 400 years later, the so-called first Thanksgiving is undergoing a reassessment. Museums and historic sites in Plymouth and around the country are telling a more nuanced story about the origins of the holiday, one that goes far beyond the lasting legend of smiling pilgrims and Wampanoag people happily enjoying a big meal together. Go away. Instead of perpetuating this myth, institutions like Plymouth's Pilgrim Hall Museum and Plymouth Patuxet Museums are acknowledging just how little information about the gathering survives. In addition to exploring the layered, devastating ramifications of the ostensibly festive feast, the new dialogue more carefully examines the complicated relationships between early English settlers and the Wampanoag, who'd lived in the coastal community they called Patuxet for some 10,000 years by the time of the 3-day celebration, probably held in late September or early October after the crops were brought in. It wasn't even called Thanksgiving back then, says Darius Combs, cultural and outreach coordinator for the Cape Cod-based Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. The Pilgrims had a large harvest that first year, so they have a feast. Wampanoag leader Massasoit, or Usamequin, shows up with about 90 of his men, and they bring 5 deer with them. They never ever mention turkey at that feast. Yeah, and apparently, I think the birds that they were hunting were actually like ducks or something like that. It was a waterfowl type animal. So the The turkey is quite new. Indeed, Winslow does not specifically call attention to this now favored fowl, though Plymouth Colony Governor William Bradford mentions a great store of wild turkeys in his similarly brief account of the bounty to be had that fall. Neither references thanks or Thanksgiving in their writings. Darius's sister-in-law, historian and author Linda Combs, is a member of the Wampanoag and the program director at the Aquanaut Cultural Center on Martha's Vineyard. She's quick to point out the lack of context surrounding what Americans celebrate today versus what happened 400 years ago. That's all part of the mythology, she says. It was a one-time event in the written record. There's just a single paragraph that describes it. When I worked at Plymouth Plantation, we referred to it as the 1621 Harvest Feast. In 1620, a small group of English separatists packed up and headed for the New World in search of religious freedom. Called themselves saints, the term pilgrims wouldn't be used to describe the settlers for another 200 years. That I did not know. I didn't know they didn't call themselves pilgrims. They headed to what is now Delaware, but landed in Plymouth in November after being blown off course by storms. The colonists first encountered the peaceful yet cautious Wampanoag the following spring. At the time, the two separate groups were attempting to find common ground. Well, yes, that would be difficult. You have someone arriving suddenly in this area, they don't speak the language, they have very different customs, it would be hard. In April 1621, both had signed a treaty pledging to come to the aid of the other in case of attack, after losing nearly half of their settlers to sickness during their first winter in America. The English were teetering on extinction. The Wampanoag weren't far from that reality themselves. Between 1616 and 1619, diseases introduced by European colonizers killed up to 90% of New England's native population in an epidemic now referred to as the Great Dying. Greatly weakened, the tribe also needed help fending off incursions from the Narragansett, a rival native group. Yeah, I've heard that. So when Europeans arrived and they brought their unique diseases to the Americas, a lot of times those diseases spread farther west at a higher rate than the European settlers actually did. So diseases were being introduced to people past the Mississippi and beyond without having actually had direct contact with the European settlers. It just, from tribe to tribe, just spread. Especially as the Europeans started pushing more and taking more of the East Coast and pushing Native Americans westward. Which is crazy to think that entire villages were being wiped out by these diseases and they had never come in contact with somebody. That's insane. How quickly these illnesses just ran through entire villages. That fall of 1621, the feast's wary attendees were still learning about each other, says Donna Curtin, executive director of Pilgrim Hall, America's oldest continuous operating public museum. These two groups very recently formed an alliance and are still getting acquainted with each other. She explains you have to look at this with diplomatic overtones in today's Thanksgiving tradition. Most people really don't look at that aspect of it. This was a way to cement this very fresh alliance between the English and the leader of the many tribes element. That's how I learned it in school, that they were using, of course, they were using food. Food is wonderful. People love food, and it brings people together. I don't know, I think that's how I learned it in, elementary. Because it was held outdoors, Tom Begley, a historian at Plymouth Patuxent Museums, likens the gatherings to political potluck picnic. Communication was difficult as only Tisquantum, remembered today as Squanto, and a few other Native American guests spoke English and could act as translators. It was a diplomatic event between these two communities, he says. Despite the language barrier, it's still pretty interesting that they were gathering together for 3 days. We always talk about how the relationship between the indigenous people and settlers changed over time, and this is one of the earliest examples of a relationship building. Well, you got food, you've got probably alcohol, and a bunch of people just wanting to live it up. Of course it would last. And, like, you're able to build friendships off of this time with random people in each group and cross the divide between each other, and just you may not be able to speak the language, but there's still a language that people could speak to each other, kind of, you can kind of hobble through it. While there is little doubt that the English and the Wampanoag shared a meal together, historians continue to debate exactly how the meeting came to be. Some believe it was an accidental assemblage, that the Wampanoag stumbled upon the pilgrims as they prepared to feast. Darius doubts that. Well, yeah, if it was more of a political thing in order to bring a gathering together, it probably wasn't accidental. Yeah, that would be weird. They had to be invited, he says. To get that many men together and organized and travel to Plymouth was a big deal. Was from Poconoket, which was 40 miles away in Rhode Island today. That was a 2-day walk back then. He represented about 70 different communities of Wampanoag. That's a lot. Another question whose answer is lost to time centers on women. Were they at this first feast? If so, were children in attendance too? Neither appears in the historical record, but Curtin feels certain that both were there. Curtin feels certain. Many English accounts of historical events recorded by men leave women out of the picture altogether. She says, yet we know they were there, and the men were particularly likely to erase the presence of native women. So when Winslow writes that Massasoit shows up with 90 men, that does not mean that other members of the community were not present. Well, also, didn't back then saying men kind of refer to all-inclusive, like a Latino? If you say if you're speaking in terms of a group, saying Latino, it could be a mixture of male and females, but because there is male, it turns masculine and goes Latino. Doesn't it? Yeah. So maybe they were doing something like that back then, I think, and it was men, but really it was humans, so they, instead of saying 90 humans, or something like that, they just said men, people. And I'm sure women were a part of it, because they did most of the cooking back then. Linda says it's possible that Wampanoag women were in Plymouth that day. Women were, and continue to be, central figures in Native culture, often taking important roles in leadership and spiritual ceremonies. For them not to be there, she says, would have been unusual. Yeah, that does sound unusual, because you want people to... I mean, it was about a political coming together and signing a treaty to be friends, basically. Why would you not have everybody there to be friends? Males, females, children. The English were known to be disdainful of women, Linda adds. They are not mentioned in the passage by Winslow, which is very short, but an educated guess makes us think that at least the wives of some of the Wampanoag leaders were there. While the first feast was likely festive, what happened after it adds a darker tone to... I don't know how... While the first feast was likely festive, what happened after it adds a darker tone to the holiday for many Native Americans, some of whom observe Thanksgiving as a national day of mourning, an annual commemoration that began in 1970. I didn't know that it's been going on since the 70s. It opened the floodgates with all kinds of people coming over, Darius says. So the Mayflower becomes a symbol of European establishment. After that comes the colonization, Christianity, cultural genocide, servitude. We don't blame the Pilgrims, but they set it up so it could happen. On Thanksgiving, Linda usually attends National Day of Mourning ceremonies held in Plymouth. She might cook a turkey, but oftentimes doesn't, not so much as a statement against the holiday, but as a practical choice reflecting the fact that she lives alone. It's too much food, she says. Okay. Linda thinks the idea of Americans gathering with their families is important. She just wants them to realize that the holiday they are celebrating came at a price. People coming together as families and having a meal, that's wonderful, she says. However, we would ask that people also remember how it is that they came to be able to do this. It's because land was taken from us so they could live here. Everything was done to annihilate our culture and people. If they think that's too dramatic, then they don't understand the history. Setting the story straight is an ongoing process unfolding at museums and historical sites across the country. In Offending 1620, where do we begin? At the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, curators reconsider the Thanksgiving narrative by exposing powerful, evolving myths that early encounters between the Wampanoag and English colonists. Emphasizing the first Thanksgiving, hosted by polite pilgrims, is inaccurately fancy clothes, pasted over centuries of violence committed against Native Americans as the nation expanded west. Separately, the Smithsonian Channel revisited the first feast this year with a new documentary filmed at Plymouth, Patuxent, titled Behind the Holiday Thanksgiving. The special demonstrates how the story of the gathering bears little resemblance to how we celebrate today. In the past, both Pilgrim Hall and Plymouth Patuxent have featured exhibitions about the true origins of Thanksgiving. The latter has a new display that digs deep into the roots of tradition. We gather Thanksgiving, gratitude, and making of an American holiday. In addition to this show, Plymouth Patuxent is hosting a series of events explaining what happened in 1621, including talks by interpreters dressed as pilgrims and Wampanoag, and cooking demonstrations showing what participants really ate 400 years ago. We provide the context about what is happening behind those relationships in 1621, as well as the roots of evolution of the holiday, says Begley. We're also talking about gratitude. In 1621, these two groups, who couldn't speak the same language, came together in Patuxent, Plymouth, for 3 days and were working together on diplomacy and forging an alliance. For that moment, it was working. Those people in 1621 couldn't predict what would happen in the future. They look at the moment as the inspiration of what becomes the national holiday. Pilgrim Hall is also open on Thanksgiving Day. Curtin will lead tours discussing the original meal and what it means today. We look back and continue to refresh our understanding of this event. She says, why did these folks get together? What did it all mean? It is an international event because of the English and Wampanoag. So we need to reflect that. Despite the limited written record, historians continue to study the origins of this important national holiday to gain a clearer picture of what really happened 4 centuries ago. Providing an accurate depiction of the circumstances that led to the first feast and the events that followed it are critical to understanding why Americans give thanks today. But you didn't talk about that. As Winslow concluded in his brief statement about that day, although it be not always so plentiful as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God we are so far from want that we often wish you partakers of our plenty. Yeah. Nice. So yeah, there we go. Little history of Thanksgiving for you. I don't know if it really... The title doesn't go with this article, I think, honestly. It's not like... That... I don't know. So, I know that, like, Thanksgiving in the past few years has become kind of a hot button with people, but a lot of people still celebrate it. A lot of people are becoming more aware of, after the initial colonization from England, what happened with Native Americans, over the 400 years up to more modern times, and especially more modern times. I don't know about you guys, but kind of finding more spoken out about things occurring with Native American groups and the federal government and treaties and such more than I used to. I don't know if it's just becoming an adult or something, but yeah, we could definitely tune our story for telling the first Thanksgiving to include that it was a political event as well, in order to bring these groups together and be happy and to help protect each other. I'm trying to think, when I first learned about Thanksgiving, it was that the Pilgrims, which apparently were calling themselves saints, had such a difficult year, they struggled to produce enough food for themselves, and then the natives of the area shared their food with them so that they wouldn't all die off. I think that's what I learned in elementary, but I don't remember ever reading anything by this guy up here, this Edward Winslow, so it seems they actually had a pretty good bounty that year. It was the year previously. Anyways, with Thanksgiving coming up, I figured that'd be a nice little story. Alright, moving on. Temporal stability of chimpanzee social culture. Chimpanzees adhere to arbitrary group-specific hand-clasp preferences that cannot be explained by genetics or the ecological environment. Is there any, there's no sound. I'm just showing them cleaning themselves, or cleaning each other. Which is funny, because humans still do this. I don't know if any of you, your partner likes having their back scratched or something. Yes. But this one's talking about, hand clasp preferences that cannot be explained by genetics. Hand clasp preferences. Open. Oh no. Culture is a hallmark of the human species, both in terms of the transmission of material inventions and adherence to social conventions. While material culture has been reported across the animal kingdom, indications of social culture in animals are limited. Moreover, there is a paucity of evidencing cultural stability in animals here. Based on a large data set spanning 12 years, I show that chimpanzees adhere to arbitrary group-specific hand-clasp preferences that cannot be explained by genetics or the ecological environment. Despite substantial changes in group compositions across the study period, and all chimpanzees having several behavioral variants in their repertoires, chimpanzees showed and maintained the within-group homogeneity and between-group heterogeneity that are so characteristic of the cultural phenomenon in the human species. These findings indicate that human culture, including its arbitrary social conventions and long-term stability, is rooted in our evolutionary history. Okay. Data collecting between 2007-2019. Analysis. I analyzed the stability of group preferences in GHC style by applying a generalized linear mixed models in the R statistical environment. What is this? Group 1, Group 2. Palm-to-palm style. Proportion. Okay, so Group 1 didn't really do palm-to-palm, but Group 2 did palm-to-palm. I wonder, so they're talking about like that, and then I wonder if they do like that regularly for the non-palm to palm. Let's see, what's it say? There's more clasping styles were operationalized. Each participant simultaneously extends an arm overhead, and then either one clasps the other's wrist or hand, or both clasp each other's hand. To scrutinize behavioral variance, 2 more clasping styles were operationalized, making for 4 variations: palm, wrist, forearm, or other. All combinations of styles were observed at least once across groups. Ooh, I'm sorry. Oh, what? So, okay, they're cleaning the face. Got the chin. Okay, there we go. Clasp the hands. He had a look, I guess, because he thought it was weird. Yeah, they got some long fingers. At least it looks like they got long fingers. Hand to hand, palm to palm, I should guess. Getting the other guy's armpit. Getting the back. Nope. Getting that's what I thought I saw. That's what I thought I saw. Okay. Going back to the article. Okay. Let's see. The year, the palm to palm proportion. So I guess they didn't even look at them these years. But they haven't. Oh. Interesting. And they had a preference between groups. What they would do. Female dyads engaged more in palm clasping, while male dyads engaged more on wrist clasping could be due to the fact that chimpanzee males may use the hand clasp as a means to confirm or assert dominance over the partner. The subject wrist position allows the partner to support the weight of the subject's clasping arm, which can be viewed as a pro-social act by the partner. So even like gender or sex to sex, it was determined how you would grab someone's hand. I guess grabbing your wrist isn't really the same. I don't know if any of you walk around with your significant other grabbing each other's wrists like this. Anyways, moving on. Interesting stuff. World of Paleontology. Top 10 anthropology audiobooks of 2021. So I've never really been into audiobooks. I never really considered it reading, so I didn't listen to them. Kind of starting to get into them because there's a lot of like modern social commentary books that I want to read and just don't have the time to do it, the energy to do it, so I'm saving my actual reading on like either my sci-fi stuff, sci-fi fantasy things, or my anthropology books, and then my other things as audiobooks. So I'm kind of starting to get into that. I know a lot of people are big fans of audiobooks. So I figured I'd share this with you guys. You might find something you are interested in. Let's see. The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Rengro. New History of Humanity, David Graeber, David Rengro, a dramatically new understanding of human history challenging our most fundamental assumptions about social evolution, from the development of agriculture in cities to the origins of the state, democracy, and inequality, and revealing new possibilities for humans. Oh, human emancipation. That's awkward, just having that one word way over there. A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, Evolution and the Challenges of Modern Life by Heather Haying and Brett Weinstein. That sounds interesting. A provocative exploration of the tension between our evolutionary history and our modern woes and what we can do about it. That sounds really interesting because the type of life that a lot of Westerners, well, not even just Westerners, a lot of people hold today after industrialization, after agriculture development, it's just so incredibly different than the vast majority of human time on Earth. It's crazy. 90% of humans' time on Earth is nothing like what we know today of life. A Book of Hope by Jane Goodall. In a world that seems so troubled, how do we hold on to hope? Good old Jane Goodall. The World Before Us, The New Science Behind Our Human Origins by Tom Higham. I wonder what's new science. A fascinating investigation of the origin of humans based on incredible new discoveries and advanced scientific technology. A Story of History and Humanity by Stephen Grable. Thrilling, a bracing summary of what we have learned from archaeogenetics to the study of ancient DNA. Krauss and Trapp capture the excitement of this young field. Our Oldest Companies by Pat Shipman. How Did the Dog Become Man's Best Friend? A celebrated anthropologist unearthed the mysterious origins of the unique partnership that rewrote the history of both species. Evolution Gone Wrong. An unforgettable journey through the twisted miracles of evolution we call our body. Short History of Life on Earth by Henry G. or G. Not sure which one that is. In the tradition of E.H. Combridge, Stephen Hawking, and Alan Wiseman, entertaining and uniquely informed narration of life's life story. Being a Human by David Thorpe, a radically immersive exploration of the three pivotal moments in the evolution of human consciousness, asking what kinds of creatures humans were, are, and might yet be. A Story of Us. Our species' unique capacity for culture began to evolve millions of years ago, but it only really took off in the last few 100,000 years. This capacity allowed our ancestors to survive and raise their difficult children during times of extreme climate chaos. Understanding how this has evolved can help us understand the cultural change and diversity that we experience today. Some of these actually sound pretty interesting. I might look up a couple of these, like The Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, Story of History of Humanity by Stephen Grable. I'll probably do that one. Evolution Gone Wrong might be a fun one, and definitely A Story of Us. Yep. So yeah, if you guys are interested in any of them, they're audiobooks, you should check them out. Looks like they're all on Apple Books. All on Apple Books. So if you use like Audible or something instead, or any other type of audiobook service, you probably can find these on that format. But all their links is with Apple, so I'm assuming they probably have a contract with Apple. Alright, next. More audiobooks. 4 of Robert Walsh's, project director at Lewis Research Unit, his favorite audiobooks. So we have Human Evolution, A Very Short Introduction. Born in Africa, The Quest for the Origins of Human Life. The Origin of Humankind by Richard Leakey. That's a big name in the paleontology world. And The World Before Us, that was mentioned before. So it was recommended twice, guys. We might just have to take a listen. Alright, moving on. Oh, check that out. Another one. This one was recommended twice. Now we're gonna have to read or listen or something. It's an omen, guys. I like memes. I like science memes. They're funny. So this one's, maybe I'll get some food at that campfire. What's the worst that could happen? 10,000 years later, he's got a freaking cake on his head, poor thing. He looks miserable too. Look at that little face. I don't get it with pugs though, personally. People love pugs. I think they're ugly. Their faces are too smushed, and I feel bad for them because we did that to them, and they have massive health issues because of it. Alright, another one. The gap in the research. My study. You're just missing it. And I don't know if any of you have done a research project that happens, and it's heartbreaking, because then someone comes in and they're like, well, what about this? And you're like, what? And it ruins your research, or just changes it, or something. Yes, quite disheartening, especially if you've spent years on it. Okay, so this one was posted on November 21st. November 21st in 1953, the Piltdown Man fossils were publicly proclaimed a, quote, perfectly executed and carefully prepared fraud. It was instead an ancient human cranium combined with a heavily modified jaw of a modern orangutan. This ended a hoax that lasted over 40 years. So, Piltdown Man is a famous case where a guy took an orangutan's jaw with ancient human's cranium, which is everything except the jaw, and put them together and said, look what I found, it's a whole new species, it's the hidden link. And it fooled people. Like, they based some research around it and everything. And a human's skull is drastically different from orangutans or a chimpanzee's, primarily from the size of the cranium, but the shape of it as well. So we have this vaulted, high cranium and a forehead. Chimpanzees, orangutans, they don't really have a forehead. It slopes back more like this than up and down. So placing a huge jaw with that, one of the things that happened is the jaws, the mouth, the teeth, everything just got smaller as the cranium got bigger. It had to like do a give and take type of thing. You can't just have both really large. So having that really kind of threw off the ideas of what was going on, and it was really just sad. And it's kind of a warning to modern anthropologists to be wary sometimes of research that turns things on its head, to really look into it, to really analyze and scrutinize and do your due diligence of the material that you have. Because there are people out there who just want to make their name, sadly. Alright, I guess I can close these. Close. Snowball fight from 124 years ago, which was 1897 in Lyon, France, that has been colorized and speed adjusted. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen this clip. I've seen it in black and white, and it was quite slow. But it was like, video was really at its infancy, and this was a major thing. And I think it's kind of cool that someone has gone through and edited the footage so that we can see this. Poor guy. They all join in. But yeah, it's kind of a modern a historical archaeology thing. It's interesting. It's nice. Aw, he's running away. And it's really cool that archaeology is incorporating some of the more modern type of things. This seems like a very long time ago, but in the span of human history, it is a blink of an eye. Things have changed so much, and we're able to analyze these historical artifacts, really. Yeah, anything older than 50 years here in the States, at least, is what we do. That's considered an artifact. If you're in other countries, it tends to be a little older. I believe in the UK it's 100 years before they'll consider it not modern. But they also have buildings that are so much older than what we have here in the States. So, thought that was interesting, I shared. So, Daily Mail. Ancient human relative that lived in South Africa 2 million years ago walked like a human but climbed like an ape. Analysis of, quote, missing link lower back fossil revealed. Ugh. Ugh. I hate this missing link stuff. Missing link doesn't exist. There is no, like, little key that pulls everything together. There is always... evolution doesn't just like, oh, we have this, and then, oh, we have this species, and, oh, we have this species, and we have these two, and this one links it together. That's the missing link. No, you'll always find more and more just slow morphings of things. It's not a missing link. An ancient human relative that lived in South Africa 2 million years ago walked like a human but climbed like an ape, new analysis has revealed. Scientists said the discovery of new lower back fossils belonging to Australopithecus sediba has settled a decades-old debate about how early hominins moved. The missing link revealed a curved spine. It's not a missing link, suggesting the species spent a lot of time walking on two legs, as well as using their upper limbs to climb like apes. This is the same thing that they found with Lucy. So if you've heard of Lucy, she's a famous, very well-preserved specimen of Australopithecus africanus, I believe. Yeah. Right? I need to check myself before I wreck myself and come off as a complete idiot. Yes, I am an idiot. Okay, so it is Australopithecus afarensis. Alright. Haha. I'm not a complete fool. Okay. Where was I? Ah, yes. So, she had been studied, and they found similar things, that her hips seemed like they were more for walking upright, but her limbs indicated more of a brachiation type thing, and sort of a really grasping situation with the hands for limbs and such. So something that they could have been doing is still walking upright in trees. So they could have been grabbing a hold up top for branches and then walking along branches and occasionally jumping down, which would have been a very dangerous thing if you think about it. That's where all these predators tend to be. So sometimes going down to walk between these different forested areas. Okay, an international team of researchers led by New York University and the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg used bones found in lumps of rock from a South African cave to reconstruct one of the most complete back fossils of any hominin. Australopithecus sediba was first described in 2010 by Lee Berger and his team of the University of Witwatersrand. So here we have this, and we're looking at the lumbar, which is an incredibly important part in identifying how a species might have walked or moved in some way. Because the lumbar curve that we have this really nice like S shape in our spine that is incredibly important to be able to bear the load and the stress that walking upright puts on our bodies. So Berger and his then 9-year-old son Matthew had found the first remains of the extinct species in the Malapa cave. During excavations, a mining trackway running next to the site of Malapa Discovery also established that, like humans, Sediba had only 5 lumbar vertebrae. The lumbar region is critical to understanding the nature of bipedalism in our earliest ancestors and to understanding how well adapted they were to walking on 2 legs. Associated series of lumbar vertebrae are extraordinarily rare in the human fossil record, that with really only 3 comparable lower spines being known from the whole of the early African record. So we have this, and looking, they'll know whether or not this system of locomotion was utilized because of the way that the shoulder joint moves, the type of movement you're going to get, the shape of the scapula, so your the shoulder blade here is going to vary quite a bit. Let me see. Chimpanzee scapula, and then we'll do a human. Wait. Versus human. Let me see if I can get pictures. Let me see. Ah, this one's nice. Alright. Open. Oh, it's small. Okay, so we have a specimen DIK Y-1-1. I'm not quite sure which exact specimen that is, but we'll ignore that portion. And we will look at this. So we have Homo, Pan, Gorilla, and Pongo. I think Homo, they're talking about Homo sapiens. So this is a humans, and it's very broad. And then you look at Pan, which is your chimpanzee and your bonobos. And it's very narrow. It's kind of elongated diagonally along with the gorilla and the Pongo, which is a orangutan. So all of them are kind of narrowed, and they're elongated this way. And for the Homo, it's much wider. It doesn't have that slanting elongation. It's actually a little bit more upright. If you look at the location of these most distal points here, they're much more like over each other than these ones. It like tucks in more to be just a little bit passed over it. Whereas these ones aren't quite, and they slant. So, yes, depending on how you move, your shoulder blade is going to be a very different shape. And then looking here, the angles of this, whereas this one's pretty much horizontal, it's drastically different. Alright. So you can know if you were kind of hanging out with your hands up and climbing trees, or if you were walking through the lower limb. Lucy has kind of a mixture of both, and it seems that Australopithecus sediba did as well. So, very interesting. And look at that sweet face. She looks sweet, doesn't she? And human dinosaurs weren't extinct 40,000 yet. I don't know. I like artists' reconstruction of these species. It just kind of brings them to life, you know? And they've got so much texture to this one. It's beautiful. She looks sweet. Anyways, that is it, guys. I am done. That was fun, actually. I had a good time. I should bring in more memes and stuff from Twitter and such. I haven't really been doing that lately. I did there for a while, but last year, but I kind of stopped doing it. I'll try and bring that back up. I hope you guys kind of learned a little something, which is the hope of this stream. We all learned a little something, and I will be back next Tuesday, 4 o'clock. If you're interested, I have a Discord group that you can join. We have occasionally, I haven't done it in a while, but we occasionally do like documentaries or even just like pop culture references to paleoanthropology. At one point we did Encino Man, a 90s movie about finding a caveman in California and thawing him out and him going to high school. Gotta love the crazy pop culture stuff. Anyways, I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Stay safe. Careful out there if you're driving. And have a wonderful week.